So we can join a room now, but of course we can't see anyone. So we're going to focus on the styling of the participants in a particular room before we get on to actually showing our camera and adding people when they join. So let's do a similar thing here that we did with the homepage and just create an outer wrapper here. We'll go ahead and bring in our styles just down here, and of course we will use SCSS. This is going to get pretty complicated because we need this to be as responsive as possible, but it's not really too difficult. Okay, so let's start out with the markup here. I'm going to create a outer people element, and I'm going to give this an ID of people so we can target that. We'll see that a little bit later, if I can just spell that properly. And inside of here will be a person. So for every person, we'll have a person inside of here, and we will have the video attached to them, and we will also have the person's name as well. So I'm again just using the BEM methodology here. Now I'm just going to go ahead and fill these in with just a couple of things. So I'm going to have a video in here, and I'm going to have a name, and this should be just enough for now to get this working. So down inside of our styles then, let's first of all go and set the room height to 100% as we did with everything else, just so we have this working properly. And we're going to set a position of relative in case we absolutely position anything inside of here. Now inside of people, and let me just bring this down a little bit so we can see it a little bit clearer, we're going to set a display of flex here, and really importantly we want to wrap any content. So we're going to say, we can either say flex flow, row wrap, like so, because row is going to be the default, or we can say flex wrap, and that will just mean that as we resize and things wrap over, they will actually wrap over. Now the next thing is the vertical align. We're going to set this to the baseline so everything lines up properly, and we'll see that a little bit later. We're also going to set the width to 100%, and we're going to give the overall container a padding of 40 pixels so it doesn't hit the entire thing, the entire edge of the browser. Now the next thing we're going to do is set the video width to 100%. Just so we have that in there, and of course you can add that to your base styles if you prefer. Now we can style up each of the people. So what I'm actually going to do is go ahead and duplicate this down. Now when I'm developing, I like to say v4 1 in say 10, or in this case we could say for x in 10. It doesn't really matter in this case. And what we're essentially going to end up with that is 10 people, and you can see that already we have a good layout here. So as we bring our browser in, you'll notice that this wraps down. It's not going to be quite good enough, so we'll see this in action in just a second. So now that we have 10 people in the room, we can start to focus on styling up each of these people, e.g. person. Again, we're going to set the position here to relative in case we absolutely position anything, and we're going to set the margin on here to a percentage. So on the top we're going to set this to 0, on the east we're going to set this to 1%, we're going to set 60% on the bottom and 1% on either side, and that's because for each of these we're going to set these to have a percentage based width. So as we shrink our browser, these are going to change. Now we're also really weirdly going to set the width of each person to 100%. Now if we just preview this in the browser, it doesn't look great because each of these people is now at 100%. What I'm doing here is taking a mobile first approach. So if we pull this down to around the mobile size, what you can also do is if you don't want to resize your browser window, you can go ahead and open up your device toolbar here and see it this way. And in actual fact, that's a little bit better, so let's do that instead. Actually, just before we go any further, let's go over to index.html because of course what we want to do is allow this to work really nicely on a mobile device. So I'm going to pull over the meta tag here, go ahead and copy and paste this from the course downloads. This will just allow us to see this a little bit better on a mobile viewport. So let's go ahead and join this room, and this is how it looks on a mobile, and of course each of the video elements is above each of these users' names. So let's just go and set a background on each of these videos of black, just so we can see these working. So these are each of our users' videos. Now, as we start to scale up, of course, we don't want these to be at 100% width. So let's add in a really simple media query inside of here. And let's say target a minimum width of 576 pixels. Now what I've done is taken these sizes from the Bootstrap front-end framework, but of course you can adjust these depending on what you think is best. And we're going to say max width of 767 pixels. And for this, what we're going to do is set the width of each of these people to 49%. So what that's going to do is if we just give this a refresh and come back in, and we come out here, if we just pull this in a little bit, there we go. So that is a kind of tablet layout, if you like. Now, of course, at the moment, this isn't working perfectly because we have a width of 49% for each of these, but we also have a margin on the right and a margin on the left. So what we want to do is we want 1 and 2 to sit here. So we want 2 to sit next to each other all the way down. Now, to get around this, what we can do is down here, use nth of type, like so, and inside of here we can say 2n, so this will be a factor of 2. We're going to set the margin right to 0, like so. Let's just see what that does. Okay, so it doesn't look like it does anything at this point, but what we're then going to do is say nth of type 2 plus 1, so a factor of 2 and then an offset of 1. We're going to set the margin left to 0. All this means is that for 2n, and if we just actually have a look at this, let's say border right 1 pixel solid red, just to see what we mean. There we go. So that's 2n, so a factor of 2. When we have 2 next to each other, this is the one that we're styling. And of course, 2n plus 1, if we just do exactly the same thing, border right 1 pixel solid red, this is this one here. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying, well, this one get rid of the left margin just here, and this one get rid of the right margin. So we're down to here, we come up, we see 2 of these, and that's pretty much how that's working. So let's get rid of the borders on here, and let's focus on what happens when we pull this out even further. So let's come out to about here. Of course, the media query now isn't taking effect, so we need another media query in here to style it around this size. So let's just copy the media query structure from here, go ahead and pull this down into here. In actual fact, let's grab that, pull this down, and let's get rid of all of this. Okay, so the next is taken from Bootstrap. It will be 1 more than this, so that will be 6, 7, 8. So let's switch that over to 6, 7, 8, and the upper bounds here will be 9, 9, 1. Now for each of these, we want these to sit at a width of 32%, and then we want to do a similar thing, but this time we're going to use 3n, so a factor of 3, because we want 3 to sit next to each other. So again, we're going to use nth of type, and in here we're going to set at 3n to have a margin right of 0, and we're going to do a similar thing with that offset, so plus 1, like so. We're going to say margin left is 0. So we're just pretty much doing the same thing and just scaling it up. So what's going to happen now is, you see at this point we have 3 next to each other, at this point we have 2, and then of course we have 1. So you can see that there's a 1 just hanging around down here. That's pretty much what we'd expect. So this is working really nicely. Okay, so what happens when we pull this right up to a kind of desktop size? Well, in this case, we don't want a maximum width, we just want a minimum width media query. So let's grab this, pull this down here, finish off that block, and of course pull this in and say minimum width of 992, which of course is 1 pixel bigger than the upper bounds we had for that last media query. We're in here going to set a strange width of 23.5%. I just fiddled around with these to get these working, and let's just see what this does. So let's wait for that. Now in this case we want 4 to sit next to each other, so again we just need an nth type of 4n. Let's go ahead and pull this in here. We can pretty much copy and paste this now. So 4n, we're going to have a margin right of 0, and 4n plus 1, we're going to have a margin left of 0, and that's just going to put 4 next to each other, and that's going to be the maximum amount that we see next to each other. So now as we pull our browser in, we get 4, 3, 2, and then 1 on a very small device. Perfect. Okay, so that's pretty much it for styling out each of these people. In terms of the actual layout, of course, what we also need is just to style up the video element and all that kind of stuff. So this is the person video. The video sits inside of here. We're not directly styling the video itself, but let's just come down to here and start to style this up. So for the person video, we're going to set a background color of TCC, and for this we can get rid of the background in here. Now we can set a margin on the bottom to say 10 pixels to separate that out from the name. I'm going to go ahead and put in a box shadow in here as well, just so it looks a little bit nicer. We're going to have 0 on the x-axis, 10 pixels on the y-axis, 25 pixels spread, and we're going to use an RGBA value here so it's not too harsh. So let's say 49, 49, 49, and let's give that a 0.2 on the alpha channel. And we'll also go ahead and set a border radius here of 3 pixels just so it's a little bit more rounded and looks a little bit nicer. So that's pretty much the kind of background for each of these people, and of course the video will sit on top of that once we have their video. Now the next thing is the name. So this is again pretty straightforward stuff. We're just going to go ahead and align the text centrally, and we're going to go ahead and change over the font weight to 600, and that is pretty much our chat room layout set up. We've starred out all of these people, and of course it works really nicely on all device sizes.